This is a very strange setup. The last time I was here was before COVID, and so, the chairs were much more packed, and people weren't wearing masks while they were looking at me. It's kind of a strange image, like the camera, people sitting in this far apart way. Hello, welcome. Hi. Welcome. Hi. It's lovely to be here with you all. It brings up a lot of memories to be sitting in this room. When I first joined the Monastic Academy, we lived in this building. I slept, probably it would have been like right over there on a bedroll. And we would do all of our retreats in this room. So I probably sat like close to a dozen retreats. I remember just like one retreat in particular, sitting in that corner and just watching the daylight come and go through those windows. Exactly there. Must have been about this time of year. Yeah, so it's really sweet to be here with you all. So today I'm going to talk about pleasure and its relationship to what we typically call concentration meditation, what's often known in the business as Samadhi practice. And unfortunately, I didn't print out my notes, so I'm going to look at this iPad, but I promise you I'm not like playing Angry Birds or anything. I'm just actually looking at notes. So the reason why I felt inspired to talk about pleasure and meditation is twofold. One, I get the sense from a lot of people that meditation practice for them is not pleasurable. In fact, is often experienced as a kind of slog or a painful experience full of physical, emotional, psychological distress, which beautiful, like it's good to experience and encounter the pain in our lives. That's very worthwhile. And yet, we can develop this capacity to nourish ourselves, to cultivate a sense of pleasure in our practice. So that's one reason. And then the other was that this is what I recently sat a 75-day retreat at the Monastic Academy, and this is mostly what I did, was I sat in the way that I'm going to be sharing with you, that's specifically to cultivate pleasure. Hi, Bunny Siwei. Welcome. Hello. Hello. Welcome. Thanks for coming. So before I get into the kind of the technique and the way of approaching pleasure and meditation that I want to talk about, I first want to talk a little bit about like one of the common frames for meditation. Often we talk about concentration, and that is typically thought to be a translation of the word samadhi. So if you've hung out in Buddhist circles or meditation circles really very much at all, you will have heard the word samadhi. If you haven't heard that word, then kind of just let this go over your head. It doesn't really make a difference. It's mostly for folks who have played in these circles a lot, just to kind of trouble some of the definitions that you might have grown accustomed to. And so samadhi, the etymology of it, samada, means to collect or to bring together. And it's interesting that it's usually translated as concentration, I think, because for us in our culture, concentration has a very particular kind of flavor. For me, like, it brings to mind being in high school or middle school and having the teacher like tell me to concentrate, which usually meant like get really focused on this thing, usually a thing I didn't actually want to focus on, right? It felt like, oh, I have to concentrate. I don't really want to, but I have to like force my mind to pay attention in a very narrow way to this something. I think it's like a book or a math problem or whatever it is. And so I want to suggest a way of relating to this word samadhi that has more to do with cultivating a state of harmony. To relate to it more as generating a state of well-being and ease in the body and the mind. The sense of bringing together the body, the mind, the energy of the body into a state of harmonious ease, well-being, nourishment, feeling of safety, that kind of thing. And so my sense, based on my research and what I've explored in my own practice, is that in fact this is what the Buddha was talking about when he talked about concentration practice or samadhi practice. And he said, in fact, in the Samyutta Nikaya, the kind of like one of the holy texts of Buddhism, you might say, that concentration or samadhi practice has pleasure as its prerequisite. And now the Buddha was, didn't mess around when it comes to causality. He wasn't being like arbitrary about the relationship between pleasure and concentration there. He was saying very clearly that you can't actually get into states of samadhi without pleasure. That's the proximate cause, you might say, of concentration. That's actually not hard to even have like a kind of almost like a psychological or an evolutionary frame on this, right? So we enjoy paying attention to things that are pleasurable, right? Right? It's like you like to give your attention to things that are pleasurable. And so if you can give your attention to something that's pleasurable, your attention will tend to stay there. And in fact, this is what happens in like deep states of concentration, is that there's a kind of feedback loop between the pleasure you get from paying attention and the like kind of the settling in on that pleasure. And it just starts to feed back into itself, and you get more and more sort of steeped, more and more you let go into that well-being, into that pleasure, until it becomes your whole world, essentially. And then, it can be extremely pleasurable. And so, in fact, there was another sutta where this is a little bit of this is to kind of deconstruct people's views that meditation, like maybe you may not have this view, but that meditation ought to be painful, that perhaps I'm not really meditating unless I'm encountering emotional, physical, psychological pain. You may not have that view. That's great. You may have that view, in which case I'd like to read you this, which is from the Digha Nikaya 29-24. It says, "So if the wanderers from the other sects should say that the followers of the Sakya, and the followers of the Buddha, are addicted to these four forms of pleasure seeking, that is, states of samadhi, states of concentration, they should be told, yes, for they would be speaking correctly about you. They would not be slandering you with false or untrue statements." Addicted to this form of pleasure seeking. What kind of pleasure seeking? The pleasure that comes from states of samadhi, states of this harmonious unification of body, mind, and attention. And so he's being very clear that it's advisable. He says you should be addicted to this kind of pleasure. That's a pretty strong word. That's pretty strong language. So I'll talk a little bit more about like how to understand this kind of harmonization practice. And I'm getting a lot of this framing from a teacher named Rob Berbea. He was one of my primary teachers. He passed away recently. But I've found a couple of quotes of his that speak, I think, quite beautifully to this way of approaching the practice. Okay, so he says, samadhi, that collectedness, that calm, that concentration, it leads to pleasure. It leads to happiness. It's supposed to lead to pleasure, a sense of well-being, a sense of happiness. This is what we are aiming towards, and more over time, a really deep sense of pleasure and happiness and well-being. Really deep, profound. More profound, I would easily wager, than anything one has known before. Again, strong words. He goes on. He says, it's a kind of harmonization, if I can use that word, of the energies of the body and mind. They come into alignment. There's some kind of sense of well-being, some kind of sense of well-being that pervades the whole body space. It doesn't have to be very dramatic, but the experience of the body in states of samadhi is not so much an experience of bones and fingers and nerves, and what we all know very well about the anatomy and the physiology of the body. Instead, it's an experience of, if I can use this word, of the energy body. This space here that I call my body, begins to feel like a field of energy. It's that, and I don't mean to make such a big deal out of this concept, that comes into a kind of wholeness and alignment and harmonization and some degree of well-being. And so I would invite you to close your eyes right now and tune in to your body. And use your intention to relax as much as possible. And see if you can sense your body as a field of energy. Just see if that's available. Almost as like a field of tone or texture, vibration. You might, if you find it hard to feel, shift your attention to your hands. Often you can feel energy there more easily. And again, one of the ways that we obstruct perceiving this is through muscular tension. So anytime you can relax, that tends to make this sense of the body more available. So were people able, you can open your eyes now if you're not too far into samadhi. Do you get a sense of it? Like just, it's not like some esoteric thing that's being talked about. Right? So it's just this a different way of sensing this thing we call a body. And that's the thing that comes into a state of harmony and alignment in the practice of samadhi. Anybody have any questions so far? Is this pretty clear? Can't really tell if I'm being clear. Yeah? Yeah? Okay. So all this to say, you are allowed to feel pleasure in meditation. It's okay if practice feels good, even really good, even really, really good. It's totally okay. And in fact, it's advisable, according to the Buddha, and it's totally trainable. It's absolutely available to everybody here to be able to, if you want, sit down and pretty reliably experience states of profound pleasure. It really is available to everyone here, just as the capacity to encounter deep pain with equanimity and poise is also available to everybody here. Practice is a very broad territory, and here I'm talking about one specific approach that I've found very valuable. That's not to denigrate encountering pain and being with suffering. That's beautiful. But so is cultivating a sense of well-being and nourishment in the body. So another quote, and it says, this is again Rob Berbea, he says, "Yes, I'm concentrating on it. Yes, I'm focusing on it, but I want to relish it. I want to maximize my enjoyment, moment after moment. Where is the enjoyment here? Am I letting myself enjoy it? Can I enjoy it?" This is the part I really like nuzzling into it. Oh yeah. Or putting your tongue in a little cup of honey and just wanting to lick every last bit of honey out of it. This is the part I bolded. Don't underestimate how much we prevent ourselves from enjoying at all kinds of levels and through all kinds of indoctrination, psychologically, socially, culturally, somatically. Concentrate, sure, but probe and really enjoy. Enjoy again and again and again. Samadhi is about having a really good time. Yeah, Samadhi is about having a really good time. Yes, that's right. And so this is what I did for 75 days on my solo retreat. And it was amazing. It was amazing because, one, I got to discover all the ways that's true. I prevented myself from feeling enjoyment. I was like, no, I'm actually not allowed to feel good for no reason. Like that's somehow like morally wrong. I don't deserve to feel good for no reason. I haven't worked hard enough. I'm not good enough yet. I did a bad thing a while ago and I actually deserve to feel more pain first. Maybe if I feel a lot more pain, then I'll be able to enjoy and feel pleasure for no reason, but not yet. Not yet. And also, I later experienced, or alongside that experience, incredible pleasure, incredible joy, incredible peace, incredible ease for no reason at all. Which, talk about something that's totally radical. Like, how much money do we spend every day, every week, every year trying to feel pleasure, trying to feel good? Imagine if you could have it for free anytime you wanted. You can. You actually can. You can. We're going to practice that today. That's what we're going to do when we meditate today. But first, I feel like called to sort of disassemble some of the objections that some people who meditate a lot typically have about just feeling pleasure. And it was amazing. I taught this at Maple, and there was at least one, and I think two people who got really angry when I taught this, because they were like, no, I can't just feel pleasure. And in fact, what they discovered was that they had deep-rooted feeling beliefs that said that you're not allowed to feel pleasure. And they had to work through that first before they could simply feel pleasure. And you may find that today, and that's good, because that is what you might need to work through to just feel good for no reason. Another thing that I observed, and one of the reasons I love this practice, is that the more completely that I was able to give myself to these states of well-being and ease and pleasure, the more that my heart felt safe to open. So one teacher that I've worked with says that these deep states of concentration or samadhi are the opposite of trauma. Right? So if you think of trauma as kind of like a chronic contraction and holding in the body, and like a kind of negative emotional, mental, psychological state, these states are, if you do it enough, a chronic opening, a chronic kind of welcoming of wholesome, beautiful states of mind and energies into the body. And over time, like my heart would just feel safe enough to open and to soften. And pain would come up, emotional pain would come up, but it would be held in this heart of fulfillment, of deep nourishment that could and felt totally capable of holding that pain. Whereas when it felt like there was a kind of scarcity mentality, it didn't feel like it could. Right? So in fact, these states, this kind of practice enables us to more fully encounter the pain of life with a kind of poise and balance and open-heartedness that we might not otherwise be able to. Okay, so I'm going to read this one again, because I think this is the part that needs double-clicking again and again, which is, this is again Robert Bea. Maybe most people, maybe most of us, need to completely forget the whole question of, do I have it now? Am I in or out of samadhi? Is this it? And focus rather on enjoying, on just really maximizing your enjoyment and getting the most enjoyment in the moment and developing what needs to develop to enable you to enjoy it more, and just drop the whole question, is this it? Now, it's not saying that's always the case, but maybe today in this little workshop we can play with that way of framing it. Okay. Great. So I'll say a little piece. Oh, we have one more person coming. Nice. Welcome. Hello. Welcome. Okay, so what we're going to do is a little bit different than typical Sunday sits. It's going to be a little bit more of like a kind of clinic vibe, workshop vibe, in that I'm going to lead a guided meditation for maybe 7 to 10 minutes to get in touch with this, what I refer to as the energy body. Then we're gonna stop, and we're gonna have a little Q&A just to make sure that's like kind of everybody kind of gets that, because that's the basis then for the next guidance that I'm going to lead. And that will form another kind of primary piece in this approach to practice, which is how to relate to that energy body in a way that brings those energies into harmony, into alignment through breath and using the attention and using actually conception. Then we'll do a little short Q&A about that just to see like everybody's got that. And then finally, we'll do a last guided practice where we'll use those two pieces to try to see if we can amplify pleasure specifically. So how's that sound, everybody? Good? Cool. Okay. To begin with, find a posture of the body that expresses a sense of simultaneous openness and receptivity, along with alertness, steadiness. Try making micro adjustments, moving your spine. You can kind of sense there's a tone in the somatic field of uprightness, kind of verticality. Then once you've found that, or to whatever degree you've found that, you might just invite your body to relax. Wherever you notice any obvious muscle tension, just let that release into the ground. You might bring your attention to the heart area. Remind yourself that there's no other reason to do this practice than as an act of kindness. Kindness to yourself, kindness to the world. See if you can let that sense of wholesomeness, of goodness. Touch your body. This is a beautiful act. You can open to that. Then stretching your awareness to cover the whole field of the body and a little bit beyond the body, just an inch or two. Almost, if it works for you, the sense of an egg shape. And permeate that whole field with awareness. You might experience it as a field of tone, texture, vibration, energy. Some traditions, they call it chi, prana, often called impermanence in Buddhism. Just tune in, like tuning the radio station, the radio dial, to this field of energy, this energy body. Not trying to change it or interfere with it in any way. Opening. Invariably, your attention will contract, will get contracted. And when you notice that, simply stretch it back open to cover this whole field. If you notice obvious muscular tension, just relax. Again, tension in the body obstructs the flow of energy. The more you can relax your body, the more vibrant this field becomes. So for all the practices we'll do today, this forms the base, this energy body experience. So take a few more moments to tune in, to become sensitive to this way of being with the body. Way of sensing the body. And just release into it. With this practice, it's not at all important to have anatomical clarity. It is important to try to stretch your attention, your awareness to cover the whole space. Now, it doesn't have to be clear that you have fingers or toes or legs. It's just a field of energy. permeate that field with your awareness. In a few moments, I'll ring the bell. When I do, see to what degree you can stay in touch with this energy body as we move into a little bit of discussion. In fact, it's possible to always keep a little bit of attention there. It's fun to explore. So this is a chance to maybe clarify if that was confusing to you or if you had trouble accessing the energy body. If you didn't, or if there are no questions, we can move on to the next guidance. But if there's anything anybody wants to share about that, or yeah.
I think I have an easier time in the morning accessing that. Like I feel like in the morning if I just lie still, I feel this sense of pleasure just and I can hold my heart. It feels like it's radiating out of my heart. And I like laying in bed for like 15 minutes and just feel that. But now doing it, it's like I can feel the tiredness of the day kind of descending upon me. So I don't know how you bring that energy up more.
Yeah. So we'll explore that a little bit in the next guidance. With the energy body, at least for this part, it's just a matter of tuning in, whether it feels good or bad, or however it is. And so it sounds like you have pretty easy access to that kind of field, but there's a question of how to sort of nudge it towards well-being when you're in a state of tiredness. Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. We'll see what happens in the next. Yeah. Anybody else?
I just have a comment.
Yeah.
It seems as I'm doing this like an eyeball looking in 360 degrees, like just trying to stretch in every direction kind of thing. It's interesting to not just be out of like the front-facing view.
Totally. Yeah. I find that I have to work harder to kind of fill in towards the back. Like there's a tendency for me to want to like sense the energy in front more. Yeah. That's good to try to do the full 360. Yeah. Cool. Great. So everybody feels, Kemma.
Yes, there's a way that my sensations feel vague. And I'm wondering if, I mean, I can't compare phenomenologically with other humans, but I'm wondering if I should be also reaching for more clarity and specificity in my awareness of sensation. Or if it's okay to have this kind of like global.
Yeah. So this practice tends to be more global and kind of whole body and sort of intuitive and less concerned with like, some practices are very concerned with like the particular arising and passing away of the particular sensations. Here we're trying to get more of like a big picture, just like sense of the field as it's sort of morphing and turning and doing its thing. As you spend more time with this practice, the kind of brightness or clarity or vividness will tend to increase, but you shouldn't try to increase it. It will just increase as you kind of steep in it and spend more time there. And you'll find even in this next guided practice, like it will become more clear as you kind of breathe with it and sort of like steep in it and fall into it and all of that. Yeah, but don't try to increase the clarity. Although sometimes you can take the image of like turning up the dimmer switch. Like you can just sort of take that image, like I'm gonna turn up the lights, and all of a sudden it'll become brighter and more vivid. But don't like try to force it or anything. Yeah.
So when you're talking about, you said global, but it's the body.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, global to the body. Yeah, not. Yeah, don't put your attention or awareness like too far out, like more than like 2 inches or so beyond the body. Yeah, good. Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah. Okay. Y'all ready for a slightly deeper dive? Okay. Drink some water. So in this guidance, we're going to, again, open up the energy body and then try a number of different ways to nourish and harmonize and bring that energy body into alignment. And so I'm going to give a lot of different cues, and you can try them all out, or you can find one that feels really like it works and just do that. It's up to you. Once again, dropping into the body, tuning into the body. As much as possible, inviting yourself to relax, inviting your body to relax. And when you feel ready, stretching your awareness to cover this whole field of this energy body. Getting a kind of global sense. Tuning in. Just as it is. Again, when your attention contracts, stretching it back open again to cover this whole field. Allowing it to be as it is right now. With this sensitivity to the energy body, to the whole body, what kind of breath would feel most nourishing, most easeful, most supportive, most helpful. You might ask this energy body, how does it want to be breathed right now? Perhaps it will tell you. Perhaps it won't. Just try something. You might try breathing in a long breath at the belly. See how that feels. Experimenting with breathing in whatever way feels easeful, nourishing. Like it supports a feeling of well-being. It doesn't have to be dramatic. How does it feel to imagine yourself breathing into the center of the chest? Sensitive to the whole body. What's that like? Just being curious about the impact. Or you might try breathing in, imagine that you're breathing in through the bottom of the spine. Perhaps the breath comes in the body there and flows out into the rest of the space. How does that feel? How does the breath want to be breathed there? Or you might imagine the breath coming in through the bottom of the feet. And from there, coursing up the whole body. How does that feel? In the whole body. If your attention contracts, collapses, just stretch it back open to become sensitive to the whole field. This will happen again and again. It's okay. You might try noticing how with each in-breath there's a sense of expansion. With each out-breath, a sense of release, contraction. How does that feel? Or with each in-breath, a sense of energization. Each out-breath, a sense of relaxation. What's it like to tune into that? Again, one of these prompts might be very supportive, in which case you can stick with that. You might imagine a line of energy extending from the top of the head down through into the earth, to the center of your body. Perhaps you're breathing up from the earth through your body, or breathing down from the sky into the body, into the earth. What's it like to play with that? How does that feel in the energy body? Noticing whatever is supportive of a feeling of alignment, harmonization, rest, well-being. What's it like to imagine that the breath has a quality of love? Somehow this breath carries love with it. How does that feel? What's that like? Or what's it like to see this breath as a gift? a gift. Just playing with different ways of seeing the breath. What supports a sense of harmony, well-being. Breath as gift. Gift from life. Gift from God. What supports right now? Soothing the body with the breath, easing the body, energizing the body, caressing the body, loving the body with the breath. What might it mean to love the body with the breath? For the next few minutes, I invite you to explore, play, experiment. How can you use the breath, the attention, different ways of seeing to bring harmony, bring a sense of well-being, nourishment? So, once again, create a little space for conversation. Curious if anybody wants to share how that was, or any questions. And then we have a little bit of conversation. We'll take a short break in silence, and then we'll come back for a final period of practice. And that'll be the flow. So yeah, is anybody question or anything they want to share?
That was quite enjoyable. Thank you.
Yeah. Glad to hear it. Yeah.
Yeah, it really was. Yeah. I have body pain all the time. And my goal is to not run from it. And so I'm usually not really looking for pleasure. But I can say with your help during this little short session that I was deriving quite a bit of pleasure from the practice. Yeah. Very nice.
Happy to hear that.
Yeah. What do you know?
Yeah.
Giddy up.
Yeah. Giddy up. Yeah. Yeah, it's wild. It's like right there if you look for it. Yeah. Yeah.
One thing that I know was helpful for you before, and then I sort of like call to ask about is like when I'm doing this exploration, it kind of seems like mildly pleasurable, but like looking for that ecstatic experience. Right? And it's so it's like I guess the question is like how pleasurable is like the right amount of pleasure?
Oh. Yeah. So it's a good question, and what you want to do is just lean into whatever well-being is present. So you can run the experiment, like what happens to the well-being if you're like, this well-being should be more. And you'll find that it dampens it, right? And so the way towards amplification of pleasure is through tuning into whatever is present. There's no way to kind of like force it to be more than it is, except through like giving yourself to it more completely. Yeah. I spent many hours struggling with that on retreat, for sure. And I think to some degree it just has to kind of work itself out in time too. Yeah, Danny.
I really enjoyed the enjoyment meditation.
Cool.
I am enjoying it. I had this feeling of, like, because as you were guiding it, you used some words like the breath being love, or the gift, or this being an act of kindness. And I feel like in like for me, in letting myself drop into like the energy body and like doing the breathing that felt like the right breathing, it felt like such a relief. And it felt like it just was causing like tears to come up, like I was starving. That's what it felt like, was like something in me was starving, and it was like finally getting fed. I guess that's how it feels.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's good.
That's good.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, my experience is that our body kind of knows how it wants to be breathed and held. And it sounds like your body was telling you exactly. Yeah, it's beautiful. Wonderful. Cool. Yeah.
I don't think I fell asleep.
Huh.
I forgot.
Huh.
I mean, and then at the end it's like I'm here. I'm really present. And that's always the goal. So, but somehow I forgot what, you were doing the beginning and breathing and then is that like, did anybody ever report that they just like are gone?
What, can you say a little bit more about what you mean by gone?
I don't remember. I'm not remembering what happened in between. It's like you're talking about breathing and then we're back. Should I go to sleep? I don't think so. Oh, you don't know?
I don't know. I mean, so, if you fell asleep, it might be that that's what your body kind of needs right now. If sometimes I've noticed that my mind kind of starts sinking, and there's this sort of cloudy, fuzzy thing, but it doesn't sound like that was what was happening for you.
No, it's just, I didn't even remember anything at the end. And then you were talking, you said the breathing. Oh, right. Oh, yeah, that's what we did.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, sounds interesting. Yeah,
it's interesting. I've never experienced that.
Huh. Cool. Well.
Okay.
Yeah. See what happens next time. Yeah. Huh. Very good.
Third time.
Yeah.
I don't feel pleasure or well-being when I meditate. Kind of talked to you about this before. And I couldn't find it then. There's like a little bit of relaxation, but mostly the breath just feels bad.
Breath feels bad.
Yeah. And the tightness doesn't let go. And yeah, I've been trying for so long.
Yeah. So, like with Tim's question, the idea is not to have like an ecstatic experience. It's to sort of like relate to the body in such a way that it sort of like leans towards well-being, however much is possible right now. And so one way to frame it is that we're kind of like training this skill of leaning into well-being. And as you get better at that, you'll kind of discover more of it. You'll also perhaps work through some of the obstructions to pleasure and well-being in your energy body. And then you'll kind of build on that. But it's really vital to this whole process not to get ahead of yourself in this process. Like, yes, it is possible to have like very intense pleasure in meditation, and you work with whatever's present now by tuning in to whatever amount of well-being, whatever amount of relaxation is present, and letting that be enough. Actually just really enjoying that. Whatever it is. Like if it's just the mildest relaxation and well-being, like what's it like to like really bask in that little bit? And not, as so often we do, and so often I did when I was in my cabin retreat, say like, this isn't good enough. This isn't enough. I'm not doing it right. Yada, yada, yada. And that's one of the ways we tend to sabotage the arising of well-being. Yeah. Shall we dive in again? Oh wait, no, we're gonna have a little break. Yeah, so why don't we do this in silence, get some water, go to the bathroom, and then when everybody's returned, we'll go again. in this last experiment, this last period of practice, we're gonna take what we've been playing with and focus on a particular skill that's tuning into pleasure. And I'm going to say a little bit of add a piece of conceptuality into the mix that might support you in your practice. And that's this triple of discernment, attunement, amplification. And this is a way of describing how consciousness functions, one dynamic of consciousness, whereby one way of thinking of this is if you consider this energy body experience as a kind of harmonic, almost like tonal way of experiencing the body, right? So there's different vibrations, different tones, different things kind of happening. Some of them painful, some of them pleasurable, some of them neutral. One thing you can do with your attention is discern out of that whole mix particular, we might say, frequencies, particular tones, particular vibrations. And in discerning them, you can then tune into them. Again, almost like you're tuning the dial of a radio station or a radio, sort of trying to meet that particular frequency, that particular tone. And in tuning to it, it amplifies. It sort of increases in volume in your perception. This is true, you might notice, with actually almost anything that you experience, depending on how you relate to it. But in this period of practice, if it's available to you, if you want, the invitation will be to sort of discern whatever quality might be very subtle of well-being or relaxation there is in your experience, and then tuning into it, which itself is a skill that you can learn over time. Tuning into it and then letting it, or noticing how it amplifies, how it increases, and then as much as is possible, giving yourself to that.
Again, you're tuning into what?
In this case, I'll be leading it to tune into well-being or a sense of pleasure in the body. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. And if I start guiding this and you're actually I feel horrible and contracted and that pleasure is completely unavailable to me right now. My experience is that sometimes I can sort of dive underneath the contraction and find a kind of quality of pleasure, dive underneath the pain. Other times, it's more important for me to just be with that contraction in whatever way that you know how to be with it, in a way that's conscious and kind and not, in this case, tuning into and amplifying self-hate or anything like that. So, I'm going to be guiding in a certain direction. If that's just straight up not available to you, then don't hit yourself over the head trying to go in that direction when it's it's not available to you. That makes sense to everybody? Okay. Work with what's presenting itself now, as always. Okay. Great. Once again, finding a posture that expresses both openness and alertness, receptivity and discipline. Letting the body release into the ground, completely relaxing. Perhaps scanning your body, head, releasing any tension, breathing into that space. Neck, just relaxing. Inviting tension to release down into the earth. Shoulders, upper arms, lower arms, hands. Chest, upper back, inviting the body to release, relax, drop, let go. Mid-chest, belly, especially the lower belly. Taking a couple of breaths into the lower belly and really letting it hang down to the ground. Releasing whatever tension that you find. Pelvis. Upper legs. Knees. Lower legs. Calves. Feet. And stretching your awareness to cover the whole field of the body, and perhaps a few inches beyond. Dropping into this energy body. Again, breathing in whatever way feels nourishing, feels helpful. Perhaps asking the body, how does it want to be breathed? Perhaps, where does it want to be breathed? Where does the breath want to go? While remaining sensitive to the whole body. And taking this time to be kind to the body, to love the body. You might recall any suggestions from the last guidance that felt particularly helpful. Invoke them again, try them again. Or you might be inspired to explore some other way of harmonizing and nourishing, easing the body, the energy body. It's all good. And for the next few minutes, just explore, experiment with this approach. Using the breath, using the attention, even using ideas. Reminding yourself that this breath might carry love or safety. Trying that. Whatever feels supportive for the next couple of minutes. If you find yourself putting too much pressure on yourself for whatever reason, I invite you to consider that this is really just like rearranging the couch cushions to maximize comfort. It's not a big deal. See what might feel nice. A little bit more nice. A little bit more easeful. Now, you can continue that exploration if you like, or if there is some amount of well-being or ease present, you might try tuning in to that aspect of your experience, that frequency, that tone, those sensations. Attuning. Opening. To that aspect of your experience. It doesn't have to be dramatic. Is it possible to enjoy whatever is present a little bit more? What would it take? How could you adjust to enjoy a little bit more? If the well-being wants to spread, you can let it spread. If it wants to stay where it is, let it stay. Not trying to make it be more than it is, but enjoying what is present. Relishing it, basking in it, tuning in, savoring it. It gives you a sense of how to relate. Even if the well-being is very subtle, can you tune into that? What happens when you tune into that? Sometimes I imagine myself just falling into whatever well-being is present. If you find yourself putting pressure on or trying to make there be more well-being, try saying to yourself the phrase, "This is enough. Just this much. Just this is enough." have about like 7 minutes or so for questions or comments or shares or anything else you'd like to speak into this space that we have together. Yeah.
I was experiencing an openness that I've enjoyed before and was upping the ante there, but I was also experiencing a discomfort at the same time. And so was going with your idea of increasing this, but then was saying, okay, what do you do about that?
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and so my experience of practice is one of choice, right? And so I want to be able to choose to amplify pleasure when it's appropriate, and I also want to be able to choose to work with contraction skillfully when that feels like the right thing to do. And so when that was happening for you, when you noticed that was a kind of like choice point. I would consider that to be a choice point where you can say like, am I going to lean into pleasure because that's for some reason what I want to do right now, or am I going to like explore this in my belly, right? And there are many different modalities you could
do both.
And you could do both. Sometimes you might lean into the contraction, try to like relate to that in a way that opens it up, and then actually the well-being flows more completely. Or you could just kind of ignore it for a bit, so you can experiment. But in this practice we were doing, it was the kind of correct move in the context that I was setting to go up here and enjoy. But in your daily practice, it's up to you. Yeah. Typically there will be contraction in the body unless you've had a very good day or something, I guess. I don't know.
The other thing that happened is an experience that I had earlier in the day showed up a lot.
Yeah.
Like, hello, and so you're experiencing pleasure and contraction, and then this person hanging out it's almost confusing. It's like, okay, I'm trying to figure out that. I don't know what I'm saying, except for it's what you said, go with what is, and that's what showed up.
Yeah, and often I find that like, typically when I do my evening practice, I'll sit down and like intend to do this sort of practice where I'm cultivating well-being, and what shows up is like the thing that I said to that person earlier in the day that actually wasn't so nice, and how I forgot to do this other thing, and this pain in my, and then I have to work through that, and then the flow can kind of happen. And part of what ends up being in the umbrella of skills within this context of practice is actually learning how to more and more quickly, more and more skillfully work through those obstructions, those contractions, so that the flow of energy can really take over. And it sets up a nice incentive structure, because the quicker you can release those, the sooner you can just relax into pleasure. Yeah. Yep.
There's something that's interesting that's part of my experience. It's like the sense of like energy swirling or like moving around. And like depending on like which part of my body my attention is contracting to, when like further expanding, it just like almost takes a life of its own. Yeah.
What takes a life of its own?
The swirling feeling.
In the whole body or in a particular part?
It's like along the central axis mostly.
Yeah, cool. And so it's totally rad to just like lose yourself in that swirl,
Right.
and just sort of like let that take over. That's a beautiful thing to do. And yeah, it's fun. That's fun. It's cool. It's really good. I love that. Yeah. Jeffrey, yeah.
The usual teaching that I've heard is that happiness is usually conditional about something that you're happy about, so there's a kind of localization of pleasure, and then there's a attempt to repeat it kind of thing. That kind of has an addictive, diminishing return process for pleasure, because, as William Blake said, he who binds to himself a joy doth the winged life destroy, but he who kisses the joy as it flies lives in eternity's sunrise. And usually there's this talk about clinging and trying to grasp, and that causes our contraction and suffering. And so the way you began your talk, it challenges that kind of, and when you guided us, I felt that you were asking us to focus on pleasure, as you said, for no reason. And that seems to be, like, I remember this song by Donovan, happiness, I think it's Donovan, happiness runs in a circular motion, thought is just a little boat upon the sea, all our souls are deeper than we can see, and you can have everything if you let yourself be. Cause happiness runs in a circular motion. So if you try to define happiness, it starts to turn into the other thing. Neurosis, fear of loss of happiness, doubt if you're worthy because it's slipping away, all these kind of things. But from what I also heard from the yoga teachings is that concentration is called dharana, and it's the step before dhyan, which is actual meditation, and then samadhi emerges from the relation of that practice at those the highest levels of the eightfold yogas, according to Patanjali, Astanga yoga. So the idea is that you become absorbed naturally. First you have to make an effort to become free of ambivalence and resolve your will. That's concentration. And then if you are concentrating on that which is true, good, and beautiful, it's giving you pleasure, then you become absorbed and you're in meditation. You've lost yourself of I'm trying to do something, and you've become pure experience. The problem is then usually we drop back down and say, oh, I just had an experience. I want to repeat that. Where did it go? But the secret is not to feel you have to drop back and analyze it, but keep going.
Yeah, that's right.
With what is ecstasy. It's not sensual pleasure.
That's right.
But it appears to be because it overflows into the senses.
That's right. Yeah.
But it's very hard. People get it confused. If I'm seeking pleasure, why don't I just become a hedonist? What is all this austerity, simplicity thing of conquering my monkey mind and the many voices? I'll just enjoy, and that will conquer my that's dangerous, preaching it usually. But
Yeah.
who am I to say?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so appreciate you bringing the Hindu Eightfold Path into it, and not so familiar with that tradition, but it brings to mind, so if you're familiar with, in the Buddhist system, the jhanas, the 4 jhanas or the 8 jhanas, one of the qualities of the first jhana is known as piti, which is often translated as rapture or pleasure. And one way of defining piti is as pleasure without the basis of sense contact, right? So it's somehow there's pleasure experienced in the body without any kind of external sense contact. And a lot of the practice that we did today is a way to kind of like tune in or learn the skill of kind of sparking that piti, which when you learn to do what you're talking about, like kind of not push or pull on it and sort of give yourself to it, that's how you can start to push into kind of jhanic territory, which is very ecstatic and very kind of mind altering. Yeah, so thank you for sharing.